You've been told your whole life that seeing Earth from orbit would be the most beautiful moment of your life. For the people who've actually done it, that's not what happened. Something in their brain broke instead, and it never fully put itself back together. Edgar Mitchell was the sixth man to walk on the moon. On the flight home, somewhere between the moon and Earth, he looked out the window at his own planet, hanging alone in the black, and he started crying. Not from joy, not from relief. He didn't have a word for what he was feeling. Later, he'd say the moon landing itself changed almost nothing in him. That moment on the way home changed everything. He wasn't the only one. Astronaut after astronaut has come back from orbit describing the same collision inside their skull. Picture it happening to you for a second. You look out a window, expecting a nice view, and instead your chest tightens and your eyes fill up before you've even decided how you feel. That's what this does to people. Some call it peace. Some call it grief. A few have called it the closest thing to a religious experience they've ever had, and they weren't religious people before they left. In 1987, a writer named Frank White sat down and studied dozens of these accounts side by side, and he noticed the same pattern showing up again and again in people who had nothing else in common. Test pilots, scientists, military officers. People selected specifically because they were calm under pressure, screened for years to make sure they wouldn't crack in a crisis. And nearly all of them cracked a little, the first time they really looked back. White gave it a name, the overview effect, a shift in perception that happens when a human being sees the whole Earth at once, small, fragile, and completely alone in the dark, with no line anywhere on it separating one country from another. Because from orbit, the borders disappear, not politically. Literally, you cannot see them. Every conflict you've ever read about, every war fought over a strip of land, every argument about whose side of a line you're standing on, it's all happening on a surface so small from up there that human boundaries simply don't register. The astronauts don't say they forgot the borders existed. They say that up there, for the first time, they finally understood that the borders were never real to begin with. Try holding that thought for even a few seconds. Every grudge you've ever carried over something happening on your side of a line just got smaller than a pixel. And that's when the mechanism starts to make sense. Your brain did not evolve to process this. For your entire life, home has meant a room, a street, a country. Something you could stand inside and measure with your own body. Every human brain that has ever existed has understood scale through nearness. This is big. That is far. This matters more because it's mine. Orbit deletes that instinct in about 6 seconds. Suddenly, the thing you call home isn't a place you're standing in anymore. It's an object. A small, blue, breathing object floating against a backdrop so black and so total that some astronauts have described it as staring into nothing at all. Your mind, built entirely to process nearness, is handed something it has no file for. And when a brain hits information it cannot categorize, it doesn't stay calm. It reacts. And it doesn't just react in the astronaut. It reacts in you right now, just hearing it described. That faint, uneasy pull in your stomach. For some astronauts, that reaction lands somewhere close to bliss. A sudden, overwhelming sense of connection to every other person alive. Because from up there, you're all on the same tiny object together. Author and astronaut Ron Garan described feeling something he called a violent shift in perspective, saying it happened almost instantly, and that it never fully wore off, even years after he came home. But for others, the exact same view produced something much darker. Astronaut Rusty Schweickart described a specific, disorienting terror that hit him during a spacewalk. Not fear of dying. Fear of insignificance. Looking at Earth from far enough away that everything he had ever built his identity around, his name, his career, his sense of importance, suddenly looked microscopic. Ask yourself honestly, what would happen to you in that same window seat? Would your job still feel like it matters? Would the argument you had this morning? Some astronauts have come back from these missions with real difficulty adjusting, struggling to care about the things that used to matter to them, describing an emptiness that took months, sometimes years, to work through. NASA has psychologists specifically trained to help returning astronauts process this, because a percentage of them genuinely do not come back the same. That's the part almost nobody mentions when they talk about the overview effect, like it's a nice story about unity. For some, it is exactly that. For others, it's the moment their brain got handed proof that everything they cared about was smaller than they could bear to accept, and there was no way to unsee it. Here's what almost none of these astronauts expected going in. They trained for the physical danger. Nobody trained them for this. NASA can simulate zero gravity. NASA can simulate the noise of a rocket launch, the G-force of re-entry, even the isolation of months in a capsule. Nobody has figured out how to simulate the moment your entire species stops looking like the center of anything. And here's the strange twist buried inside all of it. The astronauts who struggled the most afterward were often the ones who had the strongest sense of personal ambition going in. The test pilots, the record chasers, the ones whose whole identity was built on being exceptional, being first, being the best. For them, watching their planet shrink to the size of a marble didn't feel like enlightenment. It felt like getting quietly erased. If you're someone who measures yourself by being the best in the room, sit with that one for a second. It's you they're describing, which means the overview effect isn't really about space at all. It's about what happens to a human mind the instant it's forced to see its own life at true scale, with nothing to hide behind. Most of us never get that forced on us. We get to live our entire lives at ground level, where our house looks big, our job looks important, our problems look enormous, because we never step back far enough to see them any other way. The astronauts didn't get that choice. For a few minutes, or a few days, they were handed the one perspective evolution never built us for, and their brains reacted exactly the way yours would. Some of them broke open into something close to love. Some of them broke down into something close to grief. All of them came back changed, because once you've actually seen how small and how alone this planet really is, there is no version of your old perspective that fully fits back into your skull. You've been told your whole life that seeing Earth from orbit would be the most beautiful moment of anyone's life. For some of them, it was. For others, it was the moment they finally understood how little any of it ever meant down here. Either way, none of them came back the same. And maybe that's the real reason we keep sending people up there. Not to see the Earth, to see what's left of you once you finally do.